From our studios this week in Orlando and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. Scott, there's some Disney news we didn't cover in previous episodes because there was a few other stories to get to, but we're going to kind of wrap it together this week.
Right. Squish them into one story.
We are going to squish them into one story. And of course, the one that just happened now is just last week on July 17th. The new Country Bear Musical Jamboree opened at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. The audio animatronics spectacle stars the familiar bear characters in a completely new show, now featuring songs from Disney films, Try Everything from Zootopia, Remember Me from Coco, and more. So I didn't get a chance in this visit to get into Magic Kingdom. Also, who in their right minds would want to go to Magic Kingdom in the middle of summer with not only all the families, but with the 107 degree heat plus humidity? I have no idea. Again, really questioning the future of Floridian theme parks this week when I've been here. But I didn't get to see it, but I have seen some videos, and I have, of course, the thing that was most interesting to me as someone who has been, used to be a cast member and whatnot in that area is really the shift over to the IP songs, from it being the bear and the stuff that was made for the show to them adapting other IP songs to the show, which is a theme that we have talked about, that Disney has been, I think, intentionally crafting these experiences to reinforce their brands.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I totally understand the idea and the need to bring in more contemporary brands. Let's put it that way, than hanging on to the old stuff. But there's always going to be that push pull when it comes to something like this. I mean, I will be completely honest. Country Bear Jamboree because I visited Walt Disney World within the first 12 months that it was open. So I was young, I was with my family, and Country Bear Jamboree was like the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. And for me, this little theater kid, pre-theater kid, actually, I wasn't even involved in the theatrical world yet, but this was well worth the 2.5 hour queue that we had to wait to go in and see it. And it was this wonderful standalone IP that you could only experience there, and loved every single moment of it. And in fact, I just recently found my Big Al plush from Country Bear Jamboree that I got when I was a child, a wee child. So I will tell you that there's a child part of me that is sad about this, because it is, to me now, the Country Bear Jamboree has shifted from being its own entity to being a cover band. It's sort of like when pop bands or pop stars from past eras don't quite have enough hits to do their own concert, so they do covers of other people from the same era. That's what this feels like to me. I have not seen it. I'm sure it's lovely. I'm sure it's wonderful. I've not seen it in person. Let me rephrase that. I have seen almost the entire show on video now. But so as a purist, this is a little bit disheartening for me to see that we are no longer allowing things to be unique to the parks. We are no longer, but I also recognize the business side of me also recognizes that the people don't care about that as much. They would much rather have the comfort food of things that they recognize and things especially music that they can sing along with. So I get that as well. To me, it is less of its own attraction and is now a commercial for other Disney music. And that, like I said, that kind of breaks my heart a little bit. But I also recognize that things need to continue to move forward. And if this is what the current audiences want, I will say I'm guessing the decision to change it was not because this is what the current audiences want. My guess is this looked really good on paper when it was being decided. And I'm not commenting on its execution because I really don't know what the guests are saying. But I think it's important to recognize. I mean, this is what's happened throughout Epcot as well. Epcot was originally like going to different countries around the world, or significantly more like going to different countries around the world, and now it's like going to different countries around the world if they were at Disney. So, if all of a sudden Norway was purchased by Disney and the national anthem becomes a song from Frozen, that's. It's kind of where they've gone. So to me, it is intelligent in the fact that it's embracing all of their other IPs, but disappointing to me because they're not embracing the park as an IP unto itself.
Yep.
And that saddens me just a little bit. So I don't know. You have a different perspective on this, I think, Philip. So how do you feel about this? It's the wrong person singing the wrong songs to me.
Yeah,
it's a cover band.
Yeah, no.
We've turned Country Bear Jamboree into a cover band, but
I think I actually agree with everything that you said. I'm wondering if you think that if this is ever going to swing back in the other direction, because it's taken a while to get here. I think, originally, right, some of these concepts date back to Walt himself, kind of wanting, I think if you think about it, also, you want the attraction to stand on its own as an attraction. Like when you go into this attraction, you don't have to have any exterior knowledge. But the Disney of today is looking at world building, basically. They want to build an empire. They want to build a whole universe that you just live inside of. And it doesn't really nod itself to anything happening outside of it. Everything is within their universe. It doesn't talk to the other pieces of it. But I think even if it is a cover band, again, if you're not familiar with some of those songs or what, I don't know. To me, it actually does get old. To me, I prefer it that the ride is entertaining in and of itself, that it makes sense in and of itself. And I think that it starts to lose coherency a little bit when you're like, well, why are the bears, like, why would they choose Remember Me from Coco? That doesn't make any sense. You're kind of just, there are questions you're asking that don't make any sense versus, the original ride, it all made a lot of sense and it fit in the theming and it was good. So, I don't know. Do you think the pendulum is going to swing back at some point, or do you think it won't matter for Disney because now they're so strong? Like when Walt was making it, it had to stand on its own because they didn't have an empire, and now they have an empire. It doesn't matter, and it's never going to swing back.
Well, to me, it's like if the Country Bear Jamboree, to me, it's no different. It's the same feeling I had. That's kind of like fingernails on the chalkboard when all of a sudden they put Jack Skellington into the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
And so it used to, what I think is interesting is the rides, when the rides were designed or the attractions were designed as standalone in the live properties, they built up enough brand that you could actually create movies from them. I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean became this huge film success, as did, didn't become a success, but films were made of Haunted Mansion and Country Bear Jamboree. So it's one of those, now they're integrating, I don't know. It seems like ill-placed sponsorship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It'd be like the Country Bear Jamboree singing and then all of a sudden stopping and going, and don't forget to have a good old Mountain Dew because that's going to quench your thirst. Like, it just seems like you talk about world building. To me, it's world destruction. To me, it is tearing down the world that we've built of the Country Bear Jamboree. Now, someone can come back and say, yeah, but they could have heard these songs. And my response is, where? Did they go to the movies? Do they have an Apple Music account? Do the Country Bears from Country Bear Jamboree actually, live stream music? Maybe they do, but it just seems, to me, it seems like they're muddying the brand as opposed to reinforcing it. But at the same time, I do recognize that if you're going there with your kids, the kids are going to want to be able to sing along with songs, and that's not going to be the traditional folk music that fits with that area. It's going to be Country Bear Jamboree versions of Disney tunes that they know from other films. So I don't know. Will it swing back? I don't know. I don't know. What I'm hoping doesn't happen is that it doesn't get into some of the areas that they've really done beautiful work in creating worlds. You know, when all of a sudden, Jabba the Hutt starts singing "Remember Me" from Coco, that's where it's gone too far, I think. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
gosh, we joke about it now. Come back like next year, or got this. Watch this D23. They're like, oh, and now announcing.
Yes, the
Oh,
Jabba the Hutt sings Disney tunes from the 90s. You know,
no, they do that whole the whole Star Wars pub, but it's Disney songs they're playing. Like Remember Me they're playing. Oh no, oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway, on that note, let's the second story that we didn't talk about when it came out, but of course it's the same concept. Of course, is the Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which is the reskin, of course, of Splash Mountain, which came out. It's been open for a while now. We just didn't have a chance to talk about it, but I think it's the same concept. It's really just taking, we're taking a story and you are changing it out, but maybe with a twist in this case, because the ride has a history. It does have a history. I want to read what I thought was a pretty good thesis statement. Actually, this is coming from Theme Park Insider Robert over there, who's always does great reporting. And I'm going to read his. He says, quote here, Disney did not need to change Splash Mountain. The Flume ride remained popular with fans 30 years after its debut at Disneyland in California, but ride's theme emerged from a racist dog whistle, and Disney leadership decided that they did not wish to be associated with that any longer. In doing so, Disney risked provoking the wrath of the countless fans who love Splash Mountain, all to right a wrong that most of the fans did not and could not see. We'll link to the full column in the show notes because I think it's a great column. It goes as Robert always does. It is excellent reporting. It goes through the history of the ride and really talks about how, in his opinion, that Disney always knew that it arose from racist origins, and they, of course, you're balancing two perspectives. The writer's perspective and his history on the ride, but then we don't actually know what Disney thinks. It's kind of his opinion of what Disney has thought, but Disney's never made a statement about the origins one way or the other. Disney was just saying, kind of making it seem like it was similar to the Country Bear Jamboree, right? Where they're like, we're refreshing the ride to keep innovating and forward and blah, blah, and then put Tiana in celebration. Of course, Disney's never going to say anything about that. The reception, since it's been open for a month, I will say the reception has been mixed, as it always is with anything that Disney does. It is always mixed. You have plenty of people who are happy that Tiana has a ride, and they're happy to see it transformed, because you see plenty of people that were, always concerned about the ride. But you have an equal amount of people who are upset that the ride has changed. And I think some of those people fall into two camps. Some that are unhappy it changed at all, especially changed into Tiana versus what it was. And then some people who are just always unhappy whenever Disney changes anything that gets away from the core, stories that they imagine. And they see Splash Mountain as one of the core stories that has been, changed. So they're not happy with that. So
it's the Mr. Toad's Wild Ride concept. That it's like, how dare you change?
Yes.
Don't change.
Yes.
Which usually sounds like me. That's usually me. I'm usually the cranky old guy who's like, don't change it. It's tradition. However, in this particular situation, I have a unique. I'm gonna share some views here, and I'm gonna share them because I'm gonna take it completely out of this story, but I will come back. I promise. This is not a rabbit hole that I'm gonna go down. So when I get bored and just want noise in the background, I will turn on Roku, I'll turn on Buzzer, which is all of the old game shows. And some of the stuff that they said on old game shows is so cringy, because in the 70s and early 80s, the treatment of women, the treatment of different ethnic backgrounds, the treatment of different races was viewed very differently. And the things that they said that were humorous and funny and got uproarious laughs, today you listen to them and you just kind of go, To me, this is what Splash Mountain was. Splash Mountain was one of those things that, in its day, there were people who just fell in love with it because it was like, oh, look how charming and lovable these stories are and these characters are, and they are. They're wonderful. They're wonderful characters, but they are characters that come out of the American history of slavery, and it's not. Let's face it. There is a character called the Tar Baby. Let's think about that for just a fleeting moment. Okay, we're done. So there is a racist overlay in here, and did Disney know it was racist? I don't. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it was considered racist when it was originally conceived.
Correct. Yeah.
I think it was considered culturally appropriate.
Yeah.
But we have moved on, and I think this change is the right thing to do. I think now that little girls of color can see themselves in a Disney princess, in a major attraction, is exactly the right way to go. And now, this is my opinion as an old white guy. So I'm hoping I'm not offending anyone. That's not my intent, nor am I trying to put words in people's mouths. But I think this is the right way to go. I think it is in what I have studied and continue to try to learn about DEI. It is a journey, not a destination. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I think we're following the right roadmap, and taking something that represents in my opinion, a darker time in American history, and flipping it on its head so that it shows better representation of people who don't look like me. And I think that's important, and certainly a step in the right direction. Yeah, to me, this is, I know you said it's similar to the Country Bear Jamboree. To me, this is taking one world and discarding it to bring in a new world, as opposed to cross-pollinating worlds like Country Bear Jamboree is doing.
Yeah, you're right, because they really did remove everything from the original, and they're putting a whole new world that already has a whole ethos. I mean, there's the movie. I mean, it has a whole.
Yep.
Tiana is a presence, and bringing Tiana into it and placing it in there.
And interestingly enough, for me personally, when Song of the South came out, I saw that as a wee child. So that is the film that I identify with. I do not identify with Tiana, but I'm also not the target audience for this either. And I also want to make certain that there's plenty of things that I saw as a child growing up that I could say that's me. That's what I want to be. That's what I want to aspire to. And this opens up that door for a whole bunch of people who, in my opinion, have been underrepresented. And I think it is a very, very good move on Disney's behalf. I think I will say, and Philip and I were talking a little bit before we started recording. I do take a little bit of issue taking the words out of context, because I have not read the full article that Philip was just quoting. I have skimmed it, and I see where he's coming from. He's coming from a place that is as you say, excellent reporting. But I want to be careful of the phrase where is it? All to right or wrong that most fans did not and could not see. Well, if they could not see it, then they weren't looking very closely, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And was it a fun ride that everybody just kind of glossed over and went, yeah? Well, that to me, that is the most dangerous kind of racism. Yeah. Is that the kind of racism that is disguised as something that is just fun and fluffy. Oh, look, it's about a rabbit and a bear, and look how cute that is. Yeah. While reinforcing the ideas of slavery, and so I think this is exactly the right thing to do. That's what I'm trying to say, and I applaud Disney for making this, and for those people who are unwilling or unable to accept this change, I'm sorry, but I think that it's the same thing people would say to me about, what do you mean you're having them sing "Remember Me" in Country Bear Jamboree? I'm going to say the same thing to, what do you mean you don't feel comfortable with Tiana taking over Splash Mountain? So we all have our own biases, we all have our own micro biases, and we all have our own preferences. And I think the important thing is to recognize that they're not always cut and dried, and we need to embrace and make sure that what we are indeed seeing and what we are indeed saying are what we really want to say and see. Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't really have much to add. I think I'm mostly in agreement with everything, so I don't want to belabor it too much. I think we can move on. But
let's talk business, Philip. Let's talk business.
Yeah,
There's a big business story coming up.
I do agree. Overall, I think it's a good change. And the only thing I would say is, even though a thing is popular, that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be innovated. And so that would be my only, throw everything else out the window. But even and then, just because a thing is popular now doesn't mean it's not future proofed. That's always, especially with us with manufacturing, even, that's always the dance that we run with even our lighting fixtures. It's like, we have some that are our bread and butter, and there's always that resistance. There's always, you want to keep it going because it's your bread and butter, but then you have to think 3, 5, and 10 years down the road at each of those points and say, is it still going to be the best at those times? And you have to start preparing, and it always causes friction, even in what we do. When I laugh because we have made our fixtures better, but it still upsets people. And, you're like, why are you up? It's literally better. It's a better light. It's more value for you. Everything is easier for you. And they're still upset because they have to change the number on their piece of paper. And then they can't be bothered.
It's also because they now have to learn how to utilize the new equipment. But again, here you just have to process new stories, because they could have, if they wanted to just innovate Splash Mountain, they could have, they could have
just renovated.
Song of the South has a ton of stories that weren't represented. In fact, it only represents 1 or 2 of the stories that are in Song of the South. So if they wanted to upgrade it and keep the same story, they could have. But I think they took a good opportunity. And we were talking earlier about, we didn't know whether the change was done because of the racist overtones of the previous story, or because the ride needed to be upgraded. Yeah. But I don't care, because if the ride needed to be upgraded, they could have just upgraded it with the same story, and they didn't. So I think that's the right choice.
Yep. Okay, moving on. TAIT has announced that the private equity business at Goldman Sachs Alternatives will acquire a majority stake in the company from affiliates of Providence Equity Partners, subject to obtaining customary regulatory approvals. Financial details of the transaction were not disclosed. So that's basically the entire story. There's more in there. I mean, obviously, if you know Sachs and you know TAIT, blah, blah, blah. TAIT is a big player in theme entertainment design. I think Scott and I have both come across them in different roles across our career in the industry. So they have far-reaching impact out there. I think most consumers would recognize something they have built, for sure, if you've been in theme parks. So it's a pretty big, long-reaching firm. And I don't know if it's typical, but we don't know anything else about it. But I don't know, to me, it does signal something that we have been talking about kind of, I don't want to say ad nauseum, but kind of in the periphery for a while, is that, if you look at the Six Flags story we talked about previously, the big merger, you see there's a lot of interest there. Essentially, what we've talked about for a while is the concept of, you have these big companies that are vying over third place, essentially, in the streaming wars, which leads back to content and understanding how important content and live entertainment and all that thing is. And so we know that Disney and Universal are up there. And then we see that, this merger is hopefully going to secure Six Flags. I think their plan, at least, is to make them the third thing. And then, Disney and Universal also control their pieces of streaming. And so we'll see who the third streaming person is. But I think all this is clear that there is a tension for how profitable a live entertainment division can be. And I think everybody is looking at Disney, and I think the same thing we have talked about. They're looking at Disney at their earnings, and they are saying, well, if you take streaming aside out of the Disney company, these earnings are really good for themed entertainment. So there might be something to this. And talking about the future proofing that we were just talking about, it's pretty future proof because there's not, in the next few years, there's not going to be robots that are going to be, it's live human connection is going to be something that is pretty future proof from AI. It's not going to, it's pretty future proofed. And then when you combine that with IPs like we've been talking about, it's a really good business model. So I'm not surprised at all that you see suddenly interest in investing in these things. But I think it all comes back to what we also talked about previously, which is one does not simply build a theme park. It is not, I think Wall Street, I think sometimes Wall Street is a great predictive engine, but that doesn't mean they understand the nuances of every industry. And I do think that same with Netflix, it's not, one does not simply build a theme park. Netflix, it's not going to be easy to make a Disney park. The reason that with everything we've been talking about, all this world and all this crazy things, that is how Disney is able to be so profitable at this. And so you do not do that overnight, regardless of how much money Wall Street throws at you. So that's thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And the thing I think is interesting is, when we first started doing this show, back in the dark ages, when we first started doing this show, both Philip and I were concerned about the future of theme park in general, because it was during COVID. It was, we've done, and so we were like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? To me, having a company like Goldman Sachs, which is not, and it is Goldman Sachs Alternatives, but still, which is not necessarily in the trenches when it comes to live entertainment. The fact that they are interested and see value in owning the majority of shares in TAIT, because TAIT does, when Philip said, you all know things that TAIT's been involved in, that is true on so many levels, because it's not just theme park, it's concerts, it's event production, it's, have you ever watched a Super Bowl? It's all that kind of stuff. But it's all somehow entertainment or entertainment adjacent. And if a company outside of the entertainment industry is willing and interested and sees profitability in investing in a company that does this kind of thing and does it on a grand scale, to me, that more than anything, that shows that people who are much smarter than I am when it comes to finances see that there is a recovery here and see that there is a takeoff. And I will say it is not just in the U.S. Because having worked for a TAIT subsidiary, a lot of what they do is you'll probably never see if you're an American listener, because they're doing a lot of work in the Middle East. They're doing they did a lot of work in China. So they're doing a lot of international, and they see international growth. Like with Gia's 2030 project in Saudi Arabia, for example, they want to become a leader in the entertainment world in Saudi Arabia by 2030. And so that means they're going to be building gigantic theme parks. That means they're going to be basically creating an entertainment industry in their country. And they need somebody who knows how to do it, like a TAIT or a Thinkwell, which is a TAIT property. So Goldman Sachs is looking at this, looking forward, going, well, gosh, there's a lot of opportunity here. We should probably get at least some stock here, and the fact they're going for controlling stock is very interesting. It's very interesting. So to me, that is a very positive sign for our industry.
Is there? I actually don't know this. I'm not sure you know, Scott. I think the difference would be TAIT is not in the operations, though,
Correct.
right? So it's really just the fabrication and the building. I guess operations if it were a temporary thing like a concert or whatnot, but not like they're not they're not running theme parks. They're not staffing them. They're not like
they go for they. I always like to say they're in the business of going from nothing to something huge. So that's what they. So during this market where things are expanding, things are being built, things are explosively growing. That's where companies like TAIT, and again, I'm not a TAIT expert. I'm not even going to pretend to be, but companies like TAIT, that's where they thrive, is in that, as things start to expand, in that expansive nature of the theme park and attractions industry. And Goldman Sachs obviously sees that, and like I said, much smarter when it comes to money than I am. So they see that, are investing in that, and to me, that is a very good sign for our industry. And I think another good sign for our industry is the fact that Philip and I get together and talk about it every single week. But unfortunately, we're done for this week, and because we're out of time. So let's keep the industry going, and more importantly, to me personally, let's keep this show going. So please join us again next week for Green Tag Theme Park in 30. On behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, we will see you next week.